I know for many paralegals and other legal professionals, the end of the year is a time when you do some self reflection, maybe some self assessment. How did your year go? Did you get a good raise and a nice bonus? I know many places have moved away from doing performance reviews at this time of the year around the holidays, which I think is a good idea. But I've heard from many of you who still have your annual performance review meetings and evaluations at the end of the year. So let's talk about performance reviews today. Hi, I'm Ann Pearson with the Paralegal Bootcamp. Let's jump right in. Even if you don't have a formal performance review at your firm, and many don't, especially if you're in a smaller firm, even so, you'll get a lot out of this video. Let's start with a change in mindset. Instead of a performance review or performance evaluation, I like to call them career development opportunities. Don't roll your eyes at me. Instead of looking at and dreading it, the performance review time, think this is the time of the year when they tell you everything I did wrong and why I'm only getting a 2% raise. Instead of that, instead of dreading it, let's look forward to it as the time of year to do some self-reflection. And more importantly, let's make a plan for next year on what we're going to do differently to change that performance review into a career development opportunity. So I'll call it actionable strategy number 1. Call it a career development opportunity. Even if your employer still calls it a performance evaluation, in your mind, let's call it a career development opportunity. Next, instead of it looking at it like it's a meeting or the evaluation time of the year, that it's a one-way street, you're the observer, instead become the active participant in this process. This is your career. This is not just a 9-to-5 job. You'll recall back in an earlier episode, I did it on the podcast and I've talked about it in detail. I've talked about it in the videos, but it was all about the career development plan as an Excel spreadsheet that I'll include in the description here, but also asking yourself, how do you become an active participant? First, be prepared for that meeting with your supervisor. That's actionable strategy number 2. So first, look at it as the career development opportunity. Actionable strategy number 2, be prepared. And the way to be prepared for the meeting actually starts right after your last meeting. It's to track your accomplishments during the year instead of trying to remember everything right before the meeting. I recommend saving those emails and voicemails in one folder. You know, the ones from the client to you or to the attorney thanking you for a great job on that project. The voicemail from your attorney thanking you for working all weekend getting that transaction closed. Save all of those throughout the year because you're not going to remember them all, especially if they happened early in the year and your meeting doesn't happen until December. What else could be in the folder? Let's call it a brag folder. Things like other paralegals you've mentored, maybe other courses you've taken, courses you've taught, projects on other teams that you've pitched in to help, maybe in-house training that you've attended or taught or developed. Now let's take that one step further and every year put those into an ongoing career journal for when you want to update your resume. Some employers have self-evaluations as part of the process. I know we did when I was a paralegal manager. And if you do, that's the opportunity to pull out that brag journal and start writing all that stuff down on that self-evaluation form. Back in the day when I was a manager, the firm had the paralegals complete a self-evaluation form. And it was the exact same evaluation form that the attorneys were using to evaluate the paralegals that they worked with. It was like 10 pages of questions. Truth be told, I think that was an utter waste of time to make them do that. What I would have preferred was just a few long-form questions so that they could actually do some self-reflection. Questions like, what went well this year? What could I have done better this year? Did I achieve my goals? The ones I set for myself last year, maybe earlier in the year? And if not, why not? What goals am I setting for myself this year? How do I plan to accomplish those goals? These are the questions you can ask yourself, regardless of whether or not your employer has a formal review process or a self-evaluation form. And if you do have a formal process, when you answer those questions honestly, they are good talking points for you to bring into your meeting with your supervisor. Imagine how productive of a conversation you'd be having if you were prepared to walk into your supervisor and talk to them about how your year was, your accomplishments that they might not know about, what your plan is to improve your weaknesses. So, number 2, prepare yourself for the meeting. Have a career development plan, even if there isn't a formal meeting. All right, now we're on to the meeting. First, you have to be open-minded and be willing to consider that you might not be perfect. No one is. You have to be open to constructive criticism. In order to do that, you have to make sure that you don't have a defensive attitude, or you won't hear the criticism as constructive. You'll view it as an attack on you personally. So let's say there is some criticism, something that someone thinks that you could improve on. If something is said that blindsides you, rather than immediately blurting something out, take a deep breath. Get clarity on the criticism. Say something like, "Can you give me a specific example of what the attorney means by that? Does the manager have any suggestions on what you can do to improve in that area or how to handle it better next time?" Or you could respond and say, "I had no idea that was coming. Could I have some time to digest what was just said, and we could set a follow-up meeting to discuss this further?" That's my preference. All right, number 3, if possible, get a copy of your performance evaluations in advance of meeting with your supervisor so that you have some time to digest the information. Maybe that's not the normal where you work, but it can't hurt to ask. I can tell you, it used to bother me when I was a paralegal manager. That wasn't the firm's protocol, and I hated it. I was told, this is how we do it with the rest of the staff, so this is how we have to do it with your paralegals. And that was schedule the meeting, the paralegals show up, and for the first time, they're seeing and hearing what their attorneys had to say in the performance evaluation forms. So what I did was, if there were any really bad areas for someone and it was something that was never brought to my attention throughout the year by the attorney, then I would go talk to that attorney and ask, "Have you talked to this paralegal about this?" And if their answer was no, I would ask them for specific examples of why they would give that low of a rating in that area. And of course, that was in addition to reminding the attorney until, that point, like now you can't just wait until the end of the year and bash someone in a written performance review. If they don't want to handle it, then bring it to me and I'll handle it for them. It's just not fair to the paralegal to not give that feedback throughout the year to give them an opportunity to improve. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. Back to getting the copy in advance of the meeting. You get a copy of it, you go through and you highlight any areas that you received less than optimal ratings. And before getting defensive, take the time to truly ask yourself, what could I have done better in those areas? And finally, number 4, it's that time of the year when everyone is looking forward into the next year and setting goals or New Year's resolutions. There will probably be a couple hundred podcast episodes and YouTube videos about that topic. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because there will be plenty of other more in-depth goal setting episodes and videos out there. But I do want to give you a few tips. First, when you're setting next year's career goals, remember that life happens. The big question is, how do you set big goals without setting yourself up for not hitting that goal and feeling like your year was a failure? Commit to the action that it takes to get to the goal, but don't attach yourself to the outcome, because then you'll still see some benefit from those actions. Here's an example. Let's say you're a litigation paralegal who wants to set a goal next year to get your ACEDS certification, e-discovery certification. So you take some e-discovery courses, you get involved at a deeper level on your e-discovery projects, you start attending maybe the local e-discovery meetings. Then later in the year, you start taking a prep course to take the certification. But life happens. A family member gets sick, and you're the caretaker. So your free time in the evenings and weekends are no longer available for that prep course, so you don't sit for the exam. All of those actions that you took throughout the year has significantly increased your e-discovery project management skills and allowed you to meet some great people, maybe even find a mentor who's taken and passed the certification exam. All of those actions, they are so valuable to your career. And you know what I've been preaching for years? Focus on your career security instead of just your job security. They own your job, but you own your career. And it's up to you and you alone how successful your career is. All right, let's look into those performance reviews as career development opportunities. Bye for now.